they'll open that day, guaranteed. There's nothing worse than trying to find the right gift for somebody that already has everything. Whether that special present is for a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan or an Alabama Crimson Tide backer, maybe Gramps is a lifelong Dallas Cowboys supporter, or your brother-in-law is in LSU Tiger territory. Know a member of the Baylor Alumni Association? Is there a better Father's Day gift for someone who's a Kansas City Chiefs fan? Send them the coolest present they'll open that day, guaranteed. Now, if your favorite pro team is the Buffalo Bills or those Minnesota Vikings, well, we're sorry about that. Also, if you're a New Mexico State Aggie or a Tulane Green Wave alum, not much they can do. After all, the name isn't nice effort, you had a pretty good season footballs.com. The name is championshipfootballs.com. The coolest present they'll open that day, guaranteed.
Your client's going away for 10 years. Unless we swap first-round picks.
Fantasy football draft season is upon us. It's time for you to put the PP back in the PPR league with the sponsors of today's show, Manscaped. The leaders in below-the-waist grooming just launched the new Performance Package 4.0. Don't neglect your balls like the Packers front office has been neglecting Aaron Rodgers. Join the 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get ready for kickoff by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY. This will help you tame that Troy Polamalu in your pants. And good news for our international listeners. Their life-changing products are now available in Canada, the UK, across Europe, Australia, South Africa, and Singapore. All with the 20% off and free international shipping when you use the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY today. One of the best sponsors of the show is named SimBull. That's SIMBULL. SimBull, where Wall Street meets sports gambling in this innovative app. The SimBull brings the fun of being able to play for the long term by purchasing, selling, and trading stocks of your teams. When your teams win, you win a payout. Well, when they lose, you don't lose money. The value of your team's share is all that matters, and it's easy to use. Just download the SimBull app on your Play Store and use the promo code MDSFantasy for a $10 deposit of at least $10 or more. Join the fun of investing in your team for the long haul, where the sportsbook edge is put back into your hands as the player. For the latest and most fun in sports gambling, download SimBull and again, use the promo code MDSFantasy for your $10 deposit bonus today. Do you have trouble waking up in the morning? Well, not anymore, because Invader Coffee is here to make you look forward to that morning sunshine. Rated one of the best, smoothest tasting coffees on the market today. Originating out of Texas, this rare coffee product is able to reach new heights in quality from its air roasting process, creating coffee beans with the most robust and smooth flavor you will ever find. So make your mornings more enjoyable by going to invadercoffee.com and use the promo code BELLYUP for 15% off your next purchase. Again, that is promo code BELLYUP for 15% off of your Invader Coffee purchase today at invadercoffee.com. Hey there, sports fans. This is Dan Mater, the host of the MD's Fantasy Football Show, and I am so happy and proud to announce our availability on the Unhinged Radio Network. All you gotta do is go to unhingedsn.airtime.pro to catch us on Sundays at 12 to 1 p.m. or Monday, Thursday, and Fridays from 6 to 7:30 p.m. or on Tuesdays at 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. That's right, we are available 5 days a week on the Radio Unhinged Network, now powered by Belly Up Sports, giving you the best fantasy football information you could possibly get out there to give yourselves the MD Nation the edge in your fantasy football leagues to become champions today. So check out Unhinged Radio and listen to sports talk in a whole new way today.
This is the MD's Fantasy Football Show with Dan Mater, giving you the X's and O's of all things fantasy.
Hear he. Welcome back, MD Nation, to the show. You are listening to the MD's Fantasy Football Show. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mater. We are streaming live on social media at BellyUpMDFF Show and, of course, on the MD's Fantasy Football Show YouTube channel. Please subscribe when you get the chance. We got the Week 3 Sunday recap, ladies and gentlemen. If you're new to the show, what we're basically going to do is just recap all the Sunday afternoon games. The Sunday night and Monday night game will be on Tuesday morning show at 8 a.m. along with the waiver wire report. That's when we'll talk about the primetime games. But right now, I want to get into, while it's fresh in my head after coming off of watching at least a little bit of all these games, I always go back throughout the week and watch everything on Game Pass just in case there's something I missed. That way I make sure I have you guys prepared heading into week, the following week. In this case, it'll be week 4. So don't worry, we'll go back and watch all that and be part of the preview show that we talk about, which this week, by the way, we're going to have a special time, a special show. My wife's birthday is this weekend, so I won't be around to be able to do all the shows that I normally would leading into the weekend. So on Thursday morning, instead of from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., and instead of only previewing the Thursday night and early Sunday window games, we're actually going to go on, Chris and I, that is, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Thursday morning, bright and early, and we're going to preview all of week 4 for you, all from Thursday night all the way through Monday night. We're not going to have a mailbag segment, but that doesn't mean we won't be available for you guys. Always hit us up at BellyUpMDFF Show with any fantasy football questions. And if it's a normal week, we'll have a mailbag segment where I'll pick a few of my favorite ones and we'll give you a shout out on the show and answer them live on the show. But we'll always answer any question that comes our way. There will still be the MD's DFS contest show on Saturday night, but it will be Chris and Chaz Flaherty for the entire hour. So we'll still have that, still have your lock bets of the week. We're still going to win you guys some money. Our contest went on today. We'll announce the winner later on in the week like we normally do on Wednesdays when we open up the new contest for the week. But this was the last week for September. We'll be kicking off the October giveaway, which is the same championship football from championshipfootballs.com by Mr. Chaz Flaherty, and each weekly winner wins Easy Sports betting data. So I want to make sure I give you guys all up to date. On Thursday, I'm going to have another special announcement about some more schedule changes coming up that will be more permanent for the show. But stay tuned. We'll keep you up to date. Just follow us along on social media at BellyUpMDFF Show. You won't miss a thing, along with player news notifications, which is the other reason why I like doing the Sunday night recaps, or the Sunday recaps Sunday night, because it's fresh where we have the injury news to talk about through all these games and what we got to do. Because at the end of Sunday night, look, you have the Sunday night game, you have the Monday night game. You're trying to contemplate, okay, what do I need to win? But a lot of people are done. A lot of people know whether they won or lost already at this point. So now you're already looking forward to the next week. And maybe some of you are panicked. Maybe some of you won and you felt good. But either way, you want to get ahead of your competition. And that's what we're here to do today. So let's work our way backwards, shall we? Let's start with the Seattle Seahawks and the Minnesota Viking matchup. Vikings came away with a must win. I mean, they're down 0-2. Mike Zimmer feeling the hot seats. They had to make something happen. Dalvin Cook wasn't able to go in this game. Now, I'll give a little update there. The fact that he was a game-time decision at least does indicate to me that we're still dealing with a minor ankle sprain. I know he wasn't able to practice ultimately throughout the week, but I do think Dalvin Cook has a decent shot to be able to suit up next week. So, Dalvin Cook owners, like I said, when this injury first happened, it wasn't going to be long-term. So that's always going to be the good news. We'll watch him throughout the practice reports. We'll keep you up to date on social media. But I think there's a decent chance he does suit up in week 4. However, in his stead, Alexander Mattison sure as heck looked a heck of a lot like a Dalvin Cook out there. Did he not? 26 carries, 112 yards. And even though that in itself is impressive, the question always about Madison's been how involved he's going to be in the passing game. Because while he can catch the ball, Sometimes they would like to throw a CJ Ham out there. They activated Amir Abdullah. You thought maybe he'd be involved. No. Alexander Mattison was the only running back to get targets on top of it. 8 targets in this game. 8 targets in a game in which Minnesota was leading the entirety of this ball game, basically. Like they were never coming back from behind. So the fact that he got 8 targets in that situation, he is the full-on blown handcuff of Dalvin Cook. 6 catches, 59 yards off of those 8 targets. The only thing that he didn't do is score in this game. That was the only thing he didn't do. But after years of having Mattison be a Dalvin Cook handcuff and having multiple times where he didn't actually wind up coming through, it was nice to see him actually come through the way you would need him to, the way you expect him to, and give you a Dalvin Cook-like performance. So I guess you got to be happy about that if you were able to get Alexander Mattison as a Dalvin Cook owner. If you weren't, that's a tough break. And I would have to say this is probably going to be a long time before Alexander Mattison becomes available again to the Dalvin Cook owner if you weren't able to get him, especially after this performance, because they're going to hold on tight. Kirk Cousins was great again in this game. I mean, right now, Kirk Cousins, if you have a plus matchup, if you got a matchup that looks like it could be a shootout on paper, I think you got to plug and play him as a top 12 quarterback, or at least as a top streaming option for you to go to. It's 2 games in a row now. He's 3 games in a row now. He's been great for fantasy football purposes. In this one, he was very efficient. I mean, 30 of 38, 323 yards, 3 touchdowns in this game, no interceptions. He's playing well. He is playing. The offense hasn't been the issue for Minnesota. It's been the defense, but the defense actually showed up in this one. We'll talk about Seattle in just a minute. Justin Jefferson was able to get going again in this game. That's great news. People at Jefferson were starting to panic on him a little bit. 11 targets in this game, 9 receptions, 118 yards. He had the touchdown. Adam Thielen, man. Adam Thielen was one of my busts. I did not think for a second that he could actually keep up the touchdown rate that he had a season ago. He's scored in every game so far. He's got 5 touchdowns on the season in 3 games. And his lines outside of touchdowns are okay. Like today, he had 6 catches for the yards. You like the 9 targets. I still feel like he's touchdown dependent to give you those wide receiver 2 numbers, but it's every week. And when it's every week, you play him like he's going to score every week. And that's what you continue to do. Adam Thielen, excellent play coming through for you guys. So the big difference here was KJ Osborne was somebody I am a high-end wide receiver 4. Somebody I thought in this game that looked like a shootout on paper, the way he had played the first 2 weeks, I thought you could maybe take a shot on him if you need to hit a home run. Doesn't come through in this game. 2 receptions, 26 yards, 2 targets. He still had a good snap count, though. Obviously, he's going to be the 3rd receiver in snap counts, but still 44, 30 routes run. That's only 7 and 8 behind Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. It's not that far. The difference in this game, why it wasn't a KJ Osborne game, was because all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it was a Tyler Conklin game. 7 receptions, 70 yards, a touchdown on 8 targets. That ultimately took away from KJ Osborne giving you what he had been able to the first couple of weeks. I don't expect that to continue. Conklin's not going to make my waiver wire report. He's not going to make my tight end streaming list. I got to see it for more than 1 game. It's the first time I've even seen him be involved. And again, it's well documented the Minnesota Vikings. The tight ends typically just don't get involved. Now, on the Seattle side of the ball, we got to lead it off with Tyler Lockett. It looked really bad. The whole team was on the field. He was holding his knee. He wasn't getting up. Eventually, he was able to get up, walk off in his own power. So you're happy about that. And then on the next series, he actually came back into the game. So look, we've seen players come back into the game and still wind up having to miss practice. Swelling comes up, the next day, and they don't want to play in the following week. But the fact that he was able to come back into the game, run routes, and he looked okay to me. From the eyeball test, he looked okay to me. I know he didn't have a big game today. We'll talk about that in a second, but he looked okay when he came back in. At the very least, it shouldn't be a long-term injury, at the very least. So I think you can breathe easy on Tyler Lockett from that sense. And I would say there's a pretty good chance he suits up next week, being that he was able to come back in. But at the very least, it's not a long-term injury. Otherwise, he would not have been able to return to the game. But it looked ugly there for a second. So while he didn't have the great fantasy day, 4 receptions for 31 yards on 4 targets after being, ballooning out of nowhere. And, of course, he was my wide receiver 3 this week. I finally put him inside the top 5, and, he turns back into Tyler Lockett. It's neither here nor there. He should be fine moving forward. You continue to play him. DK Metcalf gets back on track. 9 targets, 6 receptions, 100 yards, a touchdown. I don't view this as a situation where only one guy can do well and then the other guy can't. That's not what I look at. I think this is a 1A, 1B in a sense. I think both of these guys could have games where they both go for 100 yards and a touchdown. I think it can work that way with the way this offense is built. So I don't worry about Lockett, DK just eating each other off in that kind of sense. You're still going to be good with them no matter what. Seattle, I'm going to say this about Seattle in general. They got to figure out what they want to do offensively, because right now they're playing this middle of the road nonsense, which is kind of leaving them in no man's land. Do you want to be a play action based team, or do you want to let Russ cook and the offense just run through Russ? Which one do you want it to be? For the first 3 weeks, I think there's a reason why their offense has been kind of middle of the road with a few, hot spots here or there. It's because they don't really seem to have an identity. Now you have Waldron, who I do like as the offensive coordinator. I know he's bringing in the McVay system. But I say that to kind of point out the Chris Carson thing. Like, Chris Carson's not getting the touches that you want him to get. Now, he's been getting the touchdowns, and he has been efficient. Today, he was 12 carries for 80 yards and a touchdown, had a 30-yarder, 6.7 yards a carry, but then 2 receptions, 2 yards, 2 targets. Travis Homer continuing to get that third down role that he got from last week, which I do think has to concern you to some degree if Chris Carson is going to continue to not even hit that 15 carry threshold. When you drafted a guy like Chris Carson, you were expecting him to get 15 carries a game. I think that was a reasonable expectation. And then probably a couple targets after that, hoping he gets somewhere to like 18 touches a game on a consistent basis. He hasn't gotten to 15 carries yet. Now, again, he's been getting the touchdowns. He's been efficient. So fantasy-wise, he continues to be a high-end RB2. But because Travis Homer, last 2 weeks now, has played more on third downs and 2-minute drills than Chris Carson, you're taking away some of the receptions. And in both game scripts where Seattle was leading or in this game where they were trailing, he hasn't been able to reach 15 carries. So you need him to continue to get those touchdowns in order to give you those high-end RB2 performances that you're expecting out of a Chris Carson. But that is more of a, result, because I think this offense is still trying to figure out what their exact identity is. So we have to see how that continues. In the meantime, though, because this offense is built to be consolidated around a few key players, Carson, the backfield, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Russell Wilson, from a fantasy standpoint, the productivity will still be there, but you're not going to get that ceiling from everybody that you potentially have until they figure out exactly what they want to do. Personally, for me, I think they should be play action based, because Chris Carson's a powerful runner who gets into rhythm as the game goes on. He should be seeing 15 plus carries a game, and he can play action off of that, and everybody else can run loose as a result. Russell Wilson never needs to throw the ball more than 30 to 35 times for guys like DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Wilson himself to be fantasy greatness. It just doesn't need to happen. So I want to see that come to fruition. But in the meantime, Wilson, 298 yards, a touchdown. You're a little bit disappointed. I had him as in my top 3 quarterbacks heading into this week. It didn't quite turn into the shootout that we were hoping it to be. But Seattle's got to get going on offensively, because really they're not playing up to their capabilities just as of yet, which still is kind of productive in a weird way. But I expect that to get better. Let's move on to the Rams in the Tampa Bay game. This was the big game of the week. Everyone wanted to see. I'll just say this real quickly. As far as Minnesota and Seattle goes, fantasy outlook heading into next week, nothing really changes for me on any of those guys. And for the most part, if Lockett's okay, you're scot-free. So I wanted to end it with that. You go to the Bucs, you go to the Rams. Of course, whoever won this game, this was going to be a big win for. The Rams get the big win here. They move to 3-0. They knock off the Super Bowl defending champs in what is very, very likely an NFC Championship Conference preview. Very likely that's what it's going to be. Tampa Bay, remember, they didn't have Antonio Brown, still banged up in the secondary. We said this before, you can throw on them. That's why Matthew Stafford was a top 8 quarterback for me. You can throw on them. You can take advantage of the secondary. You can't run on them. As we saw, Sony Michel had 20 carries in this game, 67 yards, 3.4 yards a carry. Highly inefficient. That's why I had Sony Michel as an RB3, who was only based on volume for me. I still didn't really want to play him, even with Darrell Henderson out. But here's what I will say. If Henderson continues to miss, it's clear that Michel just takes over the entire Henderson role, meaning he's the workhorse. There's no mixing in Jake Funk to an annoying level. He had 1 carry in this game. He wasn't involved at all in the passing game. Michel had 4 targets, 3 catches, 12 yards. Didn't do much with it, but he had all the touches. When Henderson comes back, look, not based off of this game. If Henderson misses another game and Michel does well in week 4, then maybe we'll talk. But as far as what I saw based off of this performance, and I know it was against Tampa Bay, I don't believe Michel did anything in this game to make me feel like when Henderson comes back that they're going to be in some sort of 60-40 committee. I don't. Now, maybe out of wanting to keep Henderson healthy, we could wind up seeing a 65, 35, 70, 30 split across the board between these two guys. That wouldn't surprise me, but I fully believe it will be Henderson's workhorse role when he comes back. I really do, because this offense just functions better when it has one running back. It really does, because they have the play action, everything based off of that. You don't know what they're going to call, and Stafford is everything that they traded for him to be. Everything they traded for him to be. 343 yards, 4 touchdowns, carved up this Tampa Bay team, looked great, and he's the reason why the Rams are a Super Bowl favorite along with Tampa Bay coming out of the NFC. And even with that great game, I still felt a little mad at Stafford because Deshaun Jackson, who had 3 catches for 120 yards and a touchdown, 5 targets in this game, McVay said going into this week, he's got to do a better job getting Deshaun Jackson involved in the offense because he wasn't involved at all the first 2 weeks. So he does that. He gets him involved. Deshaun should have had 3 touchdowns off of 3 bombs. He was wide open. The play that he did score the 75-yard touchdown was the same play they had ran 2 times previously, where all 3 times he gets behind the defense because he's still fast at 34 years old, and the secondary wasn't putting their hands on him for some weird reason. And the first 2 times, Stafford ungodly threw him short. I mean, the last one they threw him, Deshaun couldn't even know where the ball was. It was thrown so vastly short, he had no idea where the ball even was. He was wide open both times. Both times Stafford completely missed him, but hits him on the 3rd one, goes for a big play. Now, some people are probably going to talk about, well, is Deshaun a pickup now? No, he still played behind Van Jefferson. He still played as the 4th receiver. If he continues to get worked in and we get into the bye weeks, and this is something that we're consistently seeing where they're starting to take shots to him, at least a couple times every week, you can start to give that idea of like, maybe he's a wide receiver for, home run hit in your lineups when you get into those bye weeks or injuries. And you just like, look, I just need to hit a home run. He's somebody who's just got some upside, otherwise I'm dead in the water. He might turn into that guy. He's not that guy for me yet. I got to see it for more than 1 week. Because again, like I said, he was not involved at all the first 2 weeks. But Van Jefferson still played ahead of him. He's still the 4th guy. I'm not going to put any resources into a guy who's playing the 4th most snaps at the wide receiver position. I'm just not. It's not going to happen. We'll watch that and see how it continues. Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is on his way to being the number 1 receiver in fantasy football for 2021. He is on his way. He looks great, and the upgrade with Stafford is just uncapping his ceiling for him. Now, Cooper Kupp's great. You're going to start him every week. He's a wide receiver 1. We got that. We don't need to talk about that. 12 targets in this game, 9 catches, 96 yards, and another 2 touchdowns. The guy we need to talk about is Robert Woods. Now, I, like some of you out there, I'm a Robert Woods owner too. And I can understand why some of you right now are probably feeling frustrated that you're watching for 3 weeks now Cooper Kupp go absolutely crazy and Robert Woods continue on with these mediocre stat lines, this one being worst of all and what should have been a plus matchup for him too. Here's what I'll say. Snap count wise, Woods still played actually a couple more snaps than Cooper Kupp did, ran only 2 less targets. In this particular game, had half the amount of targets, he ran 2 less routes, had half the amount of targets from 12 to 6 because he has 6 targets in this game. But the previous 2 weeks, the target share has been pretty close. Better days are ahead for Robert Woods. Now, here's where I am going to adjust my fantasy value on Robert Woods. I'm not going to look at him as if he's in a 1A, 1B situation with Cooper Kupp, where they're both, low end wide receiver ones, high end wide receiver. Well, Cooper Kupp's case, he's going to be a high end wide receiver one until further notice now. But going into this season, for instance, they were looked at as high end wide receiver twos with wide receiver one upside. And they were both about the same range. Robert Woods, ADP wise, went a little bit ahead of Cooper Kupp for the most part. I'm no longer going to look at it that way. I mean, Cooper Kupp, he's an elite guy. But Robert Woods, I don't think you can consider him a high-end wide receiver two. I think you have to, moving forward, consider him more of a low-end wide receiver two, probably more of a high-end wide receiver three, where if you get a certain matchup you don't like, or if you have another player on your team that has a better matchup than he does, and he's seeing a similar target share, you may want to go with that other player. Just off the top of my head, for instance, that comes to mind might be, a Julio Jones type, or a better one is Mike Williams. I think you have to start Mike Williams ahead of Robert Woods until further notice right now. That's a good for instance. So I think you just have to adjust what your expectation for Robert Woods is going into the week. Better days are ahead. Remember last year, Woods got off to a horrible start the first half of the season and really closed out strong in the second half of the year. Now, yes, part of that was due to Cooper Kupp's injury, but Cooper Kupp is not the most healthy guy all the time. That is still going to be a risk throughout the year. However, even when Kupp was in there, he still would see the targets. He still had 100 receptions. He's still a good receiver. It just might be taking him and Stafford a little bit longer to get on the same page. If you're trying to trade Robert Woods, I mean, look, the only thing I can think of is you're going to package Robert Woods with somebody to try to upgrade at a particular position. That's the best you could do, because Robert Woods himself right now, I don't know what he's going to get you that's not going to be you on the losing end of that deal. Like I said, better days are ahead. Don't peg on Robert Woods, but just adjust your expectations, and maybe he's not a bona fide lock for you if you have somebody who is in a better position, let's say. So that's my big take on Robert Woods. I think we need to put that out there. Tyler Higbee, 5 catches, 40 yards. He has a touchdown this game, 5 targets. He continues to be a guy who will be somewhere in that top 12 range for me as far as tight ends. Let's switch over to the Tampa Bay side of the ball. This is what's great about Tampa Bay. They scored 24 points, and they didn't look great offensively throughout this game. And yet Tom Brady still comes through with a huge fantasy performance because he puts up 432 passing yards with a passing touchdown. And even though this game was never really too far out of hand, it's just a result of Brady with these weapons and Bruce Arians, how much they're going to put on this passing game. They passed from the first quarter all the way on. It didn't matter. And that's also going to have a low floor for the running backs, which we'll talk about in a second. But 55 pass attempts in this one. He had no interceptions, so he didn't hurt you at all. Brady, he just shows you, this is a tough match against the Rams. It's a tough defense. It's a tough defense they've played so far. For him to give you that fantasy performance and that, you got to feel good about playing Brady every single week. Okay, now, we got to talk about the running backs. I don't know if I hit this button yet already. I feel like I should have if I haven't, but I will hit it now as far as Ronald Jones is concerned.
Prepare to be flushed.
There's no reason to own Ronald Jones. None whatsoever. Because whether it's pro game script for Tampa Bay or they're coming back from behind, he's the guy getting left out in the passing game. Always will be. And even though in this game he actually wound up with one more carry than Leonard Fournette, he's still coming up behind Fournette consistently as far as the snap count goes between those two. Now, here's the other thing we got to talk about. Giovani Bernard. Talked about it last week. There's no reason to own him because he hadn't taken over the James White role. And, of course, this week he comes out and he's got 10 targets for 9 receptions, 51 yards, and a receiving touchdown. He still didn't take over the James White role quite for me. Because what we saw in that game was that on third downs, it still wasn't always necessarily Giovani Bernard. But when they went into 2-minute drill, and they had to go their 2-minute drill offense for a lot of the second half, that's when Bernard was out there. That's why he got so much targets in this game. I think part of it had to do with not having Antonio Brown as well. So I'm not ready to sit here and say, oh, that's the signal we needed to tell us that Giovani Bernard, PPR-wise, the flex play, he's the James White role. No, I got to see it more in one game, but he still was not out there on every third down. Leonard Fournette still played a lot of those. He still wound up with 3 targets, 3 catches, 26 yards. The big thing was that in the second half, when they had to come back from behind, they're playing mostly 2-minute drill offense. That's when Bernard was out there. So maybe that's what we start to see moving forward. And maybe it does tick up from there. But as of right now, it's nothing to jump on. It's nothing to move on. Mike Evans, 8 catches, 106 yards, 10 targets. People worried about him against Rams. He was going to have a low floor. Has a nice performance here. Even Godwin has a nice performance. 6 receptions, 74 yards on 7 targets in his own right. Gronk didn't have his 2 touchdown performance, 7 targets, 4 catches, 55 yards. However, the big thing is you got to be happy about Gronk because he came out of that game healthy. He took a heck of a shot in the ribs, and I thought he was going to be out for the rest of the game. Did wind up coming back, I think, a series or two later. So right now, look, Gronk's a top 6 tight end. You have to continue to play him as such. Him and Brady clearly on the same page, even when Antonio Brown comes back, presumably next week. That nothing there changes. The big thing is he came away healthy. The Raiders and the Miami Dolphins. I thought the Raiders were about to pull a big Raider move and lose to a team they had no business losing. And they tried. They tried to lose this game. They really, really did. They wound up winning in overtime 31-28 against the backup quarterback in Jacoby Brissett. So I know last week we already hit the dump button on Kenyon Drake. This game just further ensures why we hit it last week and why that continues to be the case. Peyton Barber way outcarried him, 23 carries. Surprisingly enough, Peyton Barber was actually efficient in this game, believe it or not. Had a 27-yard run, 111 yards, 4.8 yards to carry, had a touchdown. I don't expect that kind of line out of Peyton Barber. I know that is going to probably catch some people because it was against a good Miami Dolphin defense. Josh Jacobs, we still don't know if he's going to be back week 4. We kind of have to consider him on a week-to-week basis right now. And I know that puts a curveball in a lot of people's eyes. So you're going to have to wait and kind of see what happens there. But it just ensures that Kenyon Drake, even in PPR formats, doesn't have much value. Doesn't have much value. Because he's never going to get the touchdown carries. Apparently, he's never going to get double-digit carries. And even a game that was back and forth like this, you can't trust the target share to always be there. He had 6 targets, which are fine with 3 catches to 33 yards. But he's not the handcuff. He's not. So unless he winds up turning into a PPR flex running back, he has no other value. He has no upside. There's no reason to own him. Like a Cordell Patterson or a J.D. McKissick, for instance, they're going to get targeted a ton. So they have the flex PPR more so than Kenyon Drake does. But the other thing about them is that they are the one-on-one handcuffs to their guys in front of them. Well, Patterson, I still have to see if something happened to Mike Davis. I still have to see if Wayne Gallman would get involved. But as it stands right now, you have more confidence in being the one-on-one handcuff. Kenyon Drake's just not in that position. Now he would need Jacobs and Peyton Barber to get hurt. And if Peyton Barber got hurt, who knows how else they would bring off the street. So it just kind of remains to be seen. I'm not touching a Raiders running back. The only one I'm interested in is Josh Jacobs because, again, I don't trust these stat lines out of Peyton Barber unless I'm just completely desperate at the position. Derek Carr, kind of along the same lines of a Kirk Cousins, he has to be considered a weekly top 12 quarterback. 3 tough defenses in a row. Steelers, Ravens, Dolphins. All 3 of them, well over 350 yards. They're throwing the ball, man. And he's doing great. 386 yards, 2 touchdowns, and interception. But Derek Carr, man, right now, talk about safe streamers, guys you could pick up. Well, at least in some leagues, he's probably still available. But guys that you could play, as top 12 quarterbacks and feel confident about at least the volume, if nothing else, feel confident about the floor. He's one of those guys. What's crazy, though, is that he's putting up this high level of production, and yet I still don't feel good about any pass catcher outside of Darren Waller on this Raiders team. Now, again, 5 catches, 54 yards, and 7 targets. Not the big Darren Waller game you're looking for. They'll come, and as far as, that performance is, it's as good as any other tight end, really, for the most part, who didn't score a touchdown. I will say this. Henry Ruggs is not somebody who's going to be on the waiver wire report, but is somebody who's going to start to get on my radar. Had a nice game last week in week 2. 7 targets in this game, 4 catches, 78 yards. Bryan Edwards still played by far the most snaps because they trust him in the running game, so he's always going to be out there no matter what. Henry Ruggs still is more out there when they go 11 personnel, not necessarily when they're only in 2 wide receiver sets, but starting to get more and more targeted and somebody who's just on my radar. There's still too much of a split here. Because you have Edwards had 5 targets, 3 catches, 89 yards. You have Hunter Renfrow, who's still a factor, 5 receptions, 77 yards, had the touchdown this game, 6 targets. And then, of course, you have Darren Waller, who's always going to be involved. So the ball is still getting spread out pretty evenly here. But Ruggs is somebody, because he has the bigger play potential of that group, is going to start to get on my radar, but not going to make my waiver wire report yet. I need to see it a little bit more before we can confidently get to it. But he made some nice plays in this game. On the Dolphins side of the ball, I don't know how much you want to take out of the Dolphins without Tua, because this offense is going to change. specifically behind Mike Gesicki. He had 10 receptions for 86 yards and 12 targets. As long as Jacoby Brissett is the starting quarterback, I think Mike Gesicki can enter back into that mid-level tight end 2 streaming territory, because when he took over for Tua last week, Gesicki saw a lot of targets. And then this game, yes, they were trailing for most of this game. Brissett had to throw the ball way more than they would want him to, 49 times. But still, 12 targets for a tight end cannot be ignored, especially when you're in that range where you're desperately trying to find tight ends to produce. Can't be ignored. So the fact that he was able to get that with Jacoby Brissett has to give you some confidence. So for at least the next 2 weeks, because, Tua is on the short-term IR, so we're definitely going to get Brissett for at least 2 more weeks. I think Gesicki can re-enter that streaming tight end territory, because clearly Brissett has a rapport with him to target him. And this game, we got to see it with, the full plethora of wide receivers back. Will Fuller returned. Now, 3 catches, 20 yards, 6 targets. He was somebody that I was like, look, yes, he has the big play capability. Maybe you like the matchup, but I'd rather see it a week. He played the 3rd most snaps out of the 2. Waddle, Parker, he had 51 and they were in the 60s. Waddle had the most snaps. That was to be expected. He just got back. He hasn't played football in a little while. He had the personal issue last week. We're not sure what that's all about. Fuller will get more involved, and this team will be predominantly 11 personnel. So they're just going to have a lot of pass catchers out there. But right now, the top receiver to have is Jalen Waddle. And he had an insane amount of workload here. 13 targets, 12 receptions, 58 yards. So this is the other thing about Jacoby Brissett that we're seeing. He has a nice deep ball. He threw a couple deep balls in this one. He's just not very accurate. He doesn't hit it very often. And more times not, he's looking to check the ball down. So I don't know how much down the field you're going to get, but you especially love PPR value out of a Jalen Waddle right now, even half-point PPR value too. He's got a safe floor. And clearly, Brissett is targeting the middle and shorter version of the field. That's why you see Gesicki and Waddle gobble up as many targets as they did in this game. Part of it, of course, due to game script. But with Brissett out there next 2 weeks, it's a good chance the Dolphins have to come back from behind in majority of these games. So to expect that game script or a similar type of game script, maybe not going into overtime, but a similar type of game flow is very much in the cards here moving forward. So I think you can take some things out of this game. I think you might see some Jekyll and Hyde, because it's still Brissett as the quarterback. He was inconsistent when he was a starter for Indianapolis, and you get some mixed results. But I think that's how this thing kind of breaks down. Will Fuller will start to play more. I think that's going to destroy Devontae Parker. And I think eventually Will Fuller will be overtaking Devontae Parker out there on the field, in playing time, routes run, and overall just production. But those two kind of battle each other out, while Waddle and Gesicki, as long as Brissett's the quarterback, I think are safe within their high-volume roles, because that's where Brissett's looking to go with the ball majority of the time. The backfield, Myles Gaskin continues with his 5 yards of carry. But Malcolm Brown played a lot in this game. In fact, I believe he was only 34 to Myles Gaskin's 43 snaps or something along those lines. It was very close between those two. And that's something that I think will probably continue, or at least while Brissett's in there. I think because what they wanted to do is they wanted to get more of a power run balance go. They wanted to try to open up play action a little bit more. They clearly thought they could do that better job with Malcolm Brown. Now, I don't know why they thought that. Now, Brown wasn't inefficient in this game. He had 4.4 yards a carry, 7 carries, 31 yards. He comes away, of course, with the rushing touchdown on a nice 24-yard scamper. But that's the point. He would have had 6 carries for 7 yards outside of that 24 touchdown run. He's just not efficient. So why they won't continue to give Myles Gaskin more of a workload, I don't know. But this was the first game he got in a while. They had double-digit carries at the very least. 3 catches, 9 yards on 6 targets. You like the targets there. I just think he's nothing more than a very low-end RB3, because he is still getting more carries on his team than anybody else at a running back position. But you can almost make the argument that maybe he's more of an RB4 and that he really shouldn't be playing in your team, but he's not a dump. You hold him till Tua gets back. He's not a dump because he's efficient when he touches the ball, but he's not touching the ball enough. And because of Malcolm Brown, the way the Dolphins are doing this offense, which has been a catastrophe in my mind. I think the 2 coordinator thing, I don't think is working. This has been an anemic offense. Let's make no mistake about it. But as a result, Malcolm Brown, Savon Ahmed, Gaskin's not getting opportunities to catch, or is not getting opportunities in the red zone. So if he's not going to get an overabundant amount of receptions, and he's not going to get in the end zone, there's not really much upside other than you're hoping he just breaks one, because he's not getting, plus 15 carries to go along with it. So you hold him, you don't dump him, but I'm looking for more options to play if I can possibly help it in any capacity. Denver Jets, this will be quick. There's not much to talk about here. I will lead off with KJ Hamler. He got hurt, had a knee issue. Hopefully he's okay. We'll have to keep you guys up to date because that'll take some more time to know. He's probably considered week to week, I believe, at the moment. As a result, though, the target share just gets more and more consolidated if he's going to miss time along with Jerry Jeudy. Tim Patrick, 5 catches, 98 yards on 5 targets in this game. Courtland Sutton also had 5 targets and 5 receptions, but he only had 37 yards. That was a disappointment, of course, with Sutton because at the big game against Jacksonville, another juicy matchup here against the Jets. They dominated the game against Jacksonville like they did here against the Jets. So we thought, okay, well, he doesn't necessarily need a ton of volume to get it, but it wound up being Tim Patrick who got a few more deeper passes. It's just kind of how the game went. Bridgewater only threw the ball 25 times in this game. So better days are ahead for Courtland Sutton. Don't think that week 2 was just a mirage, okay? Like he's going to be featured. He's going to get the ball. And they're going to play tougher teams where they're actually going to have to put their, pedal to the metal in some instances too, and not just dominate these crappier teams, basically, which is what they've gotten to do, especially the last 2 weeks, but really all 3 weeks. I mean, they had the Giants week 1. So I'm not worried about Courtland Sutton, but Tim Patrick, if KJ Hamler's going to be out and Jerry Jeudy's going to be out, Patrick's going to enter that high-end wide receiver 4, low-end wide receiver 3 discussion because the targets are going to get more consolidated. And he's proven time and time again, when he gets a start, he produces pretty solidly. He is a threat to get you a touchdown. He is a threat to get you 100 yards in any given game, any given matchup. So somebody to keep your eye on. He's been on my waiver wire report the past 2 weeks, and he's probably going to be on it again because he just doesn't have that sexy name. But somebody who definitely produces, and you need a wide receiver, he's someone to look at. Noah Fant, super disappointing. 2 receptions, 15 yards on 3 targets. Again, nothing to look into here. It's just kind of how this game wound up going. You chalk it up to a dud. You move on. Better days are ahead. The big thing was that both Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon got to score in this game. And Javonte was a little bit more involved in the pass game than Melvin this was. And that's a switch from what we saw the last 2 weeks. He had 4 receptions, 3 catches, 33 yards. Gordon had 2 targets only, one reception with 21 yards on that. So you want to see that. If you're a Javonte Williams owner, you want to see him start to take over more of the passing down role because that will keep his floor higher. Both backs were inefficient. Don't get scared if you're the Javonte owner that Melvin Gordon had 18 carries to Williams' 12. He had a fumble, had partly to do with it. However, Shermer has a history of bouncing back with his guys the following week. I'm not worried about this following Javonte into week 4. I think, look, when it comes down to it, both of these guys are RB3s that have low-end RB2 potential given the matchup. Melvin Gordon, for instance, was in my top 24 this week. And because they scored, they produced for you. Better days are ahead for both. Melvin Gordon's going to, as long as he's healthy, he's going to keep hanging around. It's going to be a 50-50 split. So I don't think that value changes until either Javonte runs away with his job or Gordon gets injured. There's only one thing to talk about. Well, there's 2 things to talk about on the Jets side of the ball. And I'll lead it off with this. I feel like I shouldn't have to do this, but he's still pretty owned in a lot of leagues.
Prepare to be flushed.
If you have Elijah Moore in a redraft 10 or 12-man league, there's no reason to continue to own him. He's a dump. All right. And now he's got the injury where he's week to week, but this offense can only sustain one decent wide receiver. That's it. And that one receiver for me would be Corey Davis. And again, Corey Davis is only a matchup-based wide receiver 4 in my mind. That's why he came in my rankings, and it continues to be the case. When they play against good defenses, this offense isn't going to be able to move the ball. They couldn't move the ball against the Patriots. They didn't move the ball against Denver. When that shows its ugly head, when they play against Buffalo and play against the Dolphins, they're not going to be able to move the ball. It's just not going to happen. You can't play Corey Davis in those matchups. But when they have matchups against easier teams, which they will, you can plug and play him. He will have touchdown upside, and you can plug and play him as a wide receiver 3 probably in those matchups. There's no reason to own anybody else as a wide receiver on the Jets. Maybe Crowder when he gets back as a PPR option, because not in this game, but the way they had been using Berrios up to this point gives them indication. But that's only if you really just need a guy to plug and play, and only PPR formats only. not half point. The second thing is Michael Carter. If you own Michael Carter, hold Michael Carter. Don't move off of him. He had more carries than Ty Johnson did. Now, Ty Johnson had more snaps, but that's because Ty Johnson's still playing ahead of Carter when it comes to the passing down work. I still think that's going to change at some point in the season. Now, I don't think Michael Carter's going to turn into a workhorse back, but he might be playing 55% of the time. Like, he might be getting 55% of the workload across the board between carries and receptions before this season is done. I do believe that's going to be a valuable asset for you guys to go off of. So, Michael Carter, you hold him. Corey Davis, you hold him. But you're really going to have to pick your spots on when to play these guys, but they do have some value. I want to get a word in from our sponsor. We still have more games to recap and talk about, more injuries, more synopsis, more sell lows or sell highs and buy low prospects available to you guys. So stay tuned on the MD's Fantasy Football Show. We'll be back with you guys right after this.
Your client's going away for 10 years. Unless we swap first-round picks.
Fantasy football draft season is upon us. It's time for you to put the PP back in the PPR league with the sponsors of today's show, Manscaped. The leaders in below-the-waist grooming just launched the new Performance Package 4.0. Don't neglect your balls like the Packers front office has been neglecting Aaron Rodgers. Join the 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get ready for kickoff by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY. This will help you tame that Troy Polamalu in your pants. And good news for our international listeners. Their life-changing products are now available in Canada, the UK, across Europe, Australia, South Africa, and Singapore. All with the 20% off and free international shipping when you use the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY today.
You're listening to the MD's Fantasy Football Show.
We're back, MD Nation. We're back on the MD's Fantasy Football Show, streaming live on social media at BellyUpMDFF Show, and of course on YouTube, the MD's Fantasy Football Show channel. Subscribe whenever you get a chance. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mader. We're going over the Sunday afternoon Week 3 recaps, trying to get all the analysis out there, the injury updates that happened throughout the day, our immediate reactions from what happened for the majority of the games today. Make sure you check us out, Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. We'll be back with the Sunday night, Monday night preview, or Sunday night, Monday night recap and the waiver wire report. So we'll have that to look forward to. Continuing on here with our next game, the Giants and the Falcons. So I know this isn't fantasy related, but we got to put this out there. When is Joe Judge going to get the hot seat here? Because I don't think it's Joe Judge who's on the hot seat. I think it's Jason Garrett. Now, it's clear to me Garrett's going to be the scapegoat. I feel like a firing might be happening soon. You can't lose to the Falcons at home with how bad they've looked the first 2 weeks. Your team is supposed to have at least a core of talent. You're not a good team, but you're at least supposed to have a core of talent. Falcons look like a mess. Falcons look like a team, they don't know what direction they're heading in. They kept Matt Ryan for no reason, but they traded away Julio Jones. They look like a team that should be in a rebuild, but they're trying not to be. The Giants are a team that it's supposed to be now. This is Daniel Jones' third year. This is the year they're supposed to be a playoff team. They're not. So I'm really curious to see. And I'm tired of watching good offensive players, not Daniel Jones, because he's what I thought he was. Of course, the second you think you can stream Daniel Jones in a matchup because he's running all over the place is the game that, you can't, because he does nothing through the air for you whatsoever. We'll talk about that in a second. But I'm tired of watching guys like Saquon Barkley. You have to sit there and pray for him to get the volume, to get the fantasy value out of him because you don't put him in positions to succeed. Tired of Kenny Golladay being an absolute waste of a contract signing because he can't get more than 5 targets in a game. Tired of watching it all. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens moving forward. Sterling Shepard goes down with a hamstring injury, got rolled out in this game. Darius Slayton got rolled out with a hamstring injury even earlier than that. That led to Kadarius Toney having a crazy amount of snaps in this game, and yet no production. 2 catches, 16 yards, 3 targets. He had the second most snaps to Kenny Golladay at the wide receiver position, and still was no usage. Colin Johnson, 7 targets, 5 catches, 51 yards. He's interesting. I mean, Colin Johnson's somebody I've actually always kind of liked. So if you're at like those deeper dynasty leagues, he might be worth a pickup. Now, we don't know what the length on Shepard and Slayton, their hamstring injuries are going to be. We don't know yet. But assuming they miss some time, I think that had a lot to do with why Saquon finally saw 7 targets in this game. Now, part of it is that he played more in this game than he had the first 2 weeks, and there was this big plan that by week 3, they were going to fully unleash him. And snap-wise, playing time-wise, they did that. He had 16 carries. He had 6 receptions. He had 22 touches in this game. That's what you want for Saquon. He had the goal line carry. He gets you the touchdown. He had a good, productive fantasy day. What worries me still, though, if you can't hear the concern in my voice, I do still have some concern in my voice, is the 3.2 yards per carry against the Atlanta Falcons. That worries me. That concerns me. It should not be that low against the Falcons. This offensive line's got to find a way to get better. And Jason Garrett, you got to get some more screens to Barkley. Remember his big plays he had in his rookie year? A lot of them are based off of screens. Why don't you ever throw a screen? You have this bad offensive line, but they are athletic. So get them out on some smaller guys. Get their confidence underneath of them. Get Barkley in a position to make a big play. Because right now you have nobody who can make a big play. The way you're using Kenny Golladay, he's never going to make a big play unless Daniel Jones actually gets, accurate down the field, which he's not. Sterling Shepard just operates the intermediate part. Darius Slayton is the only guy he's going to be able to hit a big play with, and now he's got the hamstring injury. Kadarius Toney's still a non-factor. The only person you have on your team that could actually make a big play is Barkley. So utilize him. But that's why I think, honestly, at this point, I don't think Garrett makes it through the whole season before he gets fired. I really don't. Again, this game shows you why you can't trust Daniel Jones as a streamer, because he just might be terrible as a quarterback. Kenny Golladay, you can't drop him, but you can't trade him, and you can't start him. So he is the definition of a wide receiver in no man's land. You can't do anything with him. You can't. It's unfortunate, but you can't. You can't do a damn thing with him. So he's got to be on your bench. He's got to be no more than wide receiver 4. Now, with Shepard and Slayton out, logical thinking would tell you that this target share is about to get consolidated around Kenny Golladay, maybe Evan Ingram moving forward, and Saquon Barkley. But it happened in this game. Now, I know Galladay's a little bit banged up. He was a game-time decision with the hip injury coming into this game. But still, it's the Atlanta Falcons, and he still played the whole game. Still walks away with 5 targets. I don't know. It's the way they're utilizing him. He's either running a slant or a deep down the ball. He's not doing anything else. They're not letting him run a full wide receiver route tree. Exactly what I was worried about going to Jason Garrett. So Golladay has to be on your bench, but you can't drop him. You can't trade him. You have to hope that he turns a corner. They start to utilize him more. Maybe now they will with the wide receivers out. And then you'll be able to potentially trade him, because I want out on Kenny Golladay. If you have the opportunity to get out on Kenny Golladay, take it. If you could trade him for something at some point, take it. That's what I would be waiting for right now on Kenny Golladay. That's what I'm looking at moving forward. On the Falcons side of the ball, nothing really changes. Matt Ryan's not a play. He comes with an okay game. Cordero Patterson, I already talked about it last week, how you need to start considering him as a PPR flex play because of how involved he is in the passing game. This game just reaffirms that. He had 7 targets for 6 catches and 82 yards. He still is getting about 40% of the carries, which is kind of what the beat writers were talking about that they were expecting out of him, between him and Mike Davis. He's still inefficient as a runner, though. He's 2.9 yards a carry, 7 carries, 20 yards. Mike Davis was more efficient in this game, but he was playing against the Giants. 12 carries, 50 yards, and Blake Martinez, who their only real, run stuffer is. He got hurt early in this game, not knocked out of it. Calvin Ridley, I don't worry about. 8 receptions, 61 yards on 11 targets. Even Kyle Pitts, I know you're definitely going to be disappointed by the box score against the Giants because you're hoping maybe this is the game he breaks out, and he was worse this game than he had been the first 2 weeks. Only 3 targets, 2 catches, 35 yards. You look at the snap counts, you look at the routes run. This is still going to be centered around Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts as the guys getting the majority of the targets, especially when the Falcons are going to be down, which is going to be pretty much every time they're not playing the Giants, essentially. But Patterson will get worked in more there. Pitts is still a top 10 tight end. You're not dropping him. I'd highly doubt if you have Pitts, you have a better option. So I'm not going to be moving the needle at all on Pitts based on this game, even though it was a disappointment in a plus matchup. So not a whole lot changes for the Falcons. Mike Davis continues to be a very low-end RB3 that you can only play in plus matchups. So let's move on to the Tennessee Titans and the Indianapolis Colts. Ryan Tannehill had a very good fantasy day. Not great, but very good. Wasn't a great NFL day. 18-27, only 197 yards, 2 interceptions, but 3 passing touchdowns and tacks on 56 yards on the ground. It's a Ryan Tannehill stat line. That's kind of what you're looking for. It gets you right around the top 12 performance, and you know he'll have games where he gets that rushing touchdown or he actually does go for 250 yards passing and gets you more closer to the top 8 of quarterbacks. So he felt good about this game and gets what I used to consider a good defense. I don't know if I do anymore, especially not in the secondary. But you like the matchup in a tough divisional rivalry game that Ryan Tannehill came through with a solid production line. Derrick Henry, man, not enough can be said about this guy. There just can't be. He had 35 carries last week. He comes back and has 28 carries this week for 113 yards. Just didn't have, the 3 touchdown performance that you would, I guess, come to accustomed to it almost practically at this point. To have that kind of a workload back-to-back weeks and didn't look tired at all. It's just insane. And continues on with his being more involved in the passing ways. 3 catches, 31 yards, 3 targets, which, by the way, 3 targets was only 1 less than, the tie for the top on the team, which was 4 between 3 different players. Julio Jones, Nick Westbrook, I'm not going to bother saying Ikine, and Geoff Swam. A.J. Brown goes down with a hamstring injury early in this game. He had 2 targets. It was in first quarter of this game. Unfortunate, because this was a game that we were kind of pinning as an A.J. Brown breakout week. You need him to. Was kind of rough the first 2 weeks. And now you got the hamstring injury you got to deal with. Because he was ruled out so quickly, I do worry about this being more than just a today thing. This could be, week 4 with a question mark for week 5. We'll have to see. We'll get more information, as the days come, and we'll keep you up to date on social media at BellyUpMDFF Show. While he's out, Julio Jones has to be considered a wide receiver too. Now, something weird happened with Julio in this game. I'm not sure why, and Vrabel wasn't very enlightening when they had him in the press conference as to what the heck they were doing. But he got load managed in this game. Now, Tennessee pretty much controlled this game from start to finish. It was never a blowout, though, which is why it makes me still a little bit curious, because it's not like they had the game well in hand, but they were controlling the game for the most part. But Nick Westbrook, he had 53 snaps to Julio Jones's 35. Julio only had 7 more snaps than Chester Rogers, the number 3 receiver. This is with A.J. Brown going down early in this game. 18 routes run. It's only 1 more route run than Chester Rogers had in this ball game. They said it was a management load, so they're indicating that it wasn't that Julio suffered an injury during the game. It was just very, very odd. It was very odd, considering it's a divisional matchup. A.J. Brown was down, and while you were controlling this game, there was a point in this game where it was only a 1-point game. It was very odd. So that's something that has to make you feel uneasy moving forward, but ultimately, if A.J. Brown's going to be out, I got to think this offense is going to revolve around the passing game being mainly tilted towards Julio Jones, especially as long as this wasn't because of an injury. This was just a load management thing. I got to think, well, that load management is going to be off if you are only down to 1 star receiver. So Julio is going to have to be considered at least a low-end wide receiver 2 for me, as long as A.J. Brown is going to miss. He'll move back to being a wide receiver 3 when A.J. Brown's back out there. But you have to feel excited about playing him, even though this game was just kind of weird the way it broke down. Nick Westbrook will be the guy for A.J. Brown as far as the snaps go. But I wouldn't be surprised if this offense just got more consolidated down to Julio and Derrick Henry, quite frankly. So I don't know how much I'm going to want to run out and pick up in Nick Westbrook this week. On the Colts side of the ball, I want to give Carson Wentz some credit. He didn't play well. I didn't expect him to play. First of all, I didn't expect him to play at all, number one. And to think that he could come out there and play well, I think would be a bit ambitious. 19 of 37, 194 yards. Didn't turn the ball over. Didn't have any passing touchdowns. This guy's on 2 bum ankles, just trying to make something happen because the backup situation for the Indianapolis Colts is beyond pathetic. I want to give him a lot of credit for gutting it out and going out there and putting out a gutsy performance and having the Colts, again, like I said, in that game. It was while the Titans seemingly controlled this game, it was still only a 1-point difference at one point in this game. So I want to give them a lot of credit because he kept them in this ball game. Michael Pittman, 6 receptions, 68 yards on 12 targets. As long as Carson Wentz is playing, you could trust Michael Pittman to be a wide receiver 3, I believe. A lower end wide receiver 3, but a wide receiver 3 nonetheless, because you can continue to get the large amount of the targets. Since week 1, it's been the Michael Pittman show for targets and route runs and snaps, well ahead of Zach Pascal. Parrish Campbell's not even a thing. So I think you can feel fine about Pittman as long as Wentz is out there. The running back situation gets a little bit interesting. Jonathan Taylor's still not scoring. And in a game in which they should have been trying to take as much pressure off of Carson Wentz as they could. And again, like I said, even though they were trailing, it was never out of hand. For him to only get 10 carries against the Tennessee Titans has to be a little bit alarming. Comes away with 64 yards and wasn't involved really that much in the pass game. 3 targets, 1 reception, 8 yards. Nyheim Hines assumed his normal role of 6 targets, 5 receptions, 54 yards. That I expect to happen. Now, Hines is the one who wound up with the rushing touchdown. It was on a nice 9-yard run. So as a Jonathan Taylor owner, I get you're frustrated as all hell at that point. But it's not something I continue to have happen. Nyheim Hines will be involved in his role, which caps the ceiling of a Jonathan Taylor ultimately, which is why Jonathan Taylor has always been an RB2 for me, not an RB1. However, I tend to believe right now, Jonathan Taylor owners, some of them, especially if they're, let's say, 0-3 after this week, will be so incredibly frustrated that you might be able to get Taylor pennies on the dollar. Better days are ahead for Taylor. He is a phenomenal running back. Better days should be ahead for the Colts offense in general. They can't continue to be this banged up. At least you'd hope not. He's still a good running back. So, for instance, and we're going to talk about that game in a little bit, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who finally had a decent game against the Chargers, if I could sell him straight up for a Jonathan Taylor right now, I would 100% do it. And by the way, after this week, especially if the Taylor owner is 0-3, I think that's a deal that could get done because of the amount of frustration on Jonathan Taylor right now. I think it's a deal that legitimately could get done. So look for things like that. If you can get Jonathan Taylor for pennies on the dollar, maybe look to make a couple of offers. Don't do anything that's, don't do a parallel move, and of course, don't overpay. But if you can get for pennies on the dollar, look to make that move because he is a buy low candidate for me this week. I think they're probably hitting that point. I don't have Taylor in many places. That's why I say they out there. But I'm pretty sure Jonathan Taylor owners are hitting that point. Let's move to the Colts. I'm sorry, not the Colts. The Saints and the Patriots. First of all, as far as like NFL purposes, entertainment, watching, this was a snooze fest of a game. I mean, it was not fun to watch. But Saints show that, you know what, we're not as bad as we were week 2. We're maybe still not as good as we were week 1, but we're definitely not as bad as we were week 2. That probably being the biggest takeaway that you could have here. Jameis Winston wasn't good. 13 of 21. Didn't throw the ball very much either. 128 yards, 2 passing touchdowns. One was a YOLO shot that happened to fall into the arms of Marquez Callaway, which, of course, when I tell you guys to dump him, is the game he finally actually does something fantasy-wise. But still, only 4 receptions for 41 yards on 5 targets. And we're now 2 games and a bye week away from Michael Thomas rejoining, which, by the way, they clearly need Michael Thomas back. If Michael Thomas is going to be 100% healthy when he comes back, or close to it, I really do think he's got a chance to return to wide receiver 1 status. And that's been a big debate about people. Is he going to be 100% healthy when he comes back? Even when he comes back, is it going to be like last year, where it was a big disappointment? This is, new Jameis Winston, not Drew Brees. It's so obvious that the Saints so desperately need Michael Thomas back in the lineup that I would not be shocked he re-enters and is getting double-digit targets every single week, just given what the rest of this wide receiver core looks like. It just wouldn't shock me. So we're 2 games and a bye week away from that being a thing, but that's why Marquez Callaway is not somebody who jumps back on my radar just because he had a touchdown in this game. What you're happy about seeing, you're an Alvin Kamara owner, while he still didn't get the targets you want, still had 27 touches total because he had 24 carries for 89 yards. It was a tough Patriots defense. I wouldn't expect too many people to be efficient against them. He still had the 3 receptions, 29 yards. He gets the receiving touchdown on 4 targets. You just want Kamara to get touches. I don't think you care if they come. I mean, if you're PPR leagues, of course, you would prefer them to come to the passing game. But if you tell me that Kamara is going to get 27 touches in any given week, I'm going to say he has more likely than not going to finish as an RB1. That's all you really want to see. And that's, by the way, that's all you care about with this team. That's it. I don't care about anything else when it comes to New Orleans Saints. I don't care about the receivers. I don't care about the tight ends. I care about nothing else. All I care about is Alvin Kamara. I don't care about the quarterback of Jameis Winston either. You can drop him if you picked him up at some point during this week. Move on. But you can feel good about Kamara moving forward because they got back to the basics and making sure they got him to touch the ball. Mac Jones, I'll say this, Saints defense, they're a good pickup. They got healthy again this week, and they look good. Mac Jones, 3 interceptions in this game. Had to throw the ball more than he's had the past 2 weeks, 51 pass attempts, 270 yards. Did have the passing touchdown. Look, the Patriots don't have a lot of weapons. They just don't. Kendrick Bourne, he had 8 targets, 6 receptions, 96 yards, and he's the one who had the touchdown. Jacoby Myers continues to be the wide receiver you want to own. He continues to be a low-end, volume-based wide receiver 3, high-end wide receiver 4. 14 targets in this game, 9 receptions, 94 yards. This is not the type of game script the Patriots are looking to try to be in. They want to be in close, low-scoring games, which is why it caps everybody's fantasy potential. James White, unfortunately, gets carted off the field, goes down with what looks like a major injury. We still don't have the exact details of that injury yet, but it could be rough. It could be rough. We'll have to see exactly what happens moving forward. In the meantime, Brandon Bolden was the one who came in and played that role. I wouldn't be surprised if J.J. Taylor took on more of that role as we move forward. But what remained clear was that as sure as heck wasn't going to be Damien Harris. So if you're a Damien Harris owner and you were thinking, well, if something happens to James White, maybe then they'll let him catch the ball because he has the skill set, like Sony Michel did before him, of being able to catch the ball coming out of college. Nope. Brandon Bolden coming off the bench, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 23 yards. J.J. Taylor coming off the bench, 2 targets, 2 receptions, 3 yards. Damien Harris, 2 targets, 2 receptions, -3 yards. No matter what happens, Damien Harris will not have that role. For whatever reason, in Josh McDaniels' system, it's set up to have one guy who's only a runner and somebody else who's a pass catcher. It's unfortunate. It caps Damien Harris' ceiling, but it's just the nature of the business. Now, Damien Harris was a terrible game this week. I didn't have him. I had him as a sit this week. He was a bust of mine this week because you're playing against the Saints, who are always tough against the run, especially if you're not a running back who catches the football. You're not going to have much of a floor heading into that matchup unless you fall into the end zone. So better days are ahead for Harris, but what's disappointing is that I wouldn't look forward thinking he might have an opportunity to catch balls because he's not. The tight ends, I had hope for Jonnu Smith. He had 6 targets in this game, but it's only 1 reception for 4 yards. Hunter Henry, 6 targets as well, 5 receptions, 36 yards. They keep splitting everything evenly, and neither one is getting touchdown looks because they're on a low-scoring, low-volume passing offense most of the time, and they're eating into each other on top of it. I had high hopes that Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry could actually be, hovering around that top 12 streaming territory. I no longer do. I don't think there's any reason to own either one of these guys. So what I want to do now, I'll take another quick break and another word in from our sponsor. We still have a few more games to talk about, the cap off this Sunday afternoon recap. So everybody stay tuned here with the MD's Fantasy Football Show. We'll be back with you guys right after this.
One of the best sponsors of the show is named Symbol. That's SIMBULL. Symbol, where Wall Street meets sports gambling in this innovative app. The Symbol brings the fun of being able to play for the long term by purchasing, selling, and trading stocks of your teams. When your teams win, you win a payout. Well, when they lose, you don't lose money. The value of your team's share is all that matters, and it's easy to use. Just download the Symbol app on your Play Store and use the promo code MDSFantasy for a $10 deposit of at least $10 or more. Join the fun of investing in your team for the long haul, where the sportsbook edge is put back into your hands as the player. For the latest and most fun in sports gambling, download Symbol and again, use the promo code MDSFantasy for your $10 deposit bonus today.
You're listening to the MD's Fantasy Football Show.
Welcome back, MD Nation. Welcome back to the MD's Fantasy Football Show, streaming to you live on social media at Billy Up MDFF Show. of course, on the YouTube channel as well, the MD's Fantasy Football Show. Please subscribe. You can always catch us on your favorite pod streaming app. We're available on iHeart, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, Spreaker, being a big one. And we'll be live Monday night from 6 to 7:30 on the Unhinged Radio Sports Network, unhingedsn.airtime.pro. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mader. We're going over the Week 3 Sunday afternoon recap. On Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., we'll go over the Sunday night recap, the Monday night recap, and your waiver wire report. We're just getting our immediate reactions out here and some of the news that happened along the day today. The next game I want to talk about is that pesky Chargers-Kansas City game. Now, I'm probably the least panicked on a 1-2 team like the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not panicked at all. Now, I can't say that about the Chiefs. They seemed a little bit worried. I want to lead off with this before we get into, all the fantasy data, the numbers, the players, the stats. Andy Reid, had this report. He went to the hospital right after the game, so I didn't come out for the press conference. Everything we've been told is that he's going to be okay. Now, that could be a relative term, though. I mean, we don't know exactly what's going on. He felt ill and obviously felt bad enough that he needed to go to the hospital immediately and leave in an ambulance. I mean, that's more than just like I feel a little under the weather there. But everyone's saying he's going to be fine. Now, again, like I said, that's going to be a relative term. Fine as to like you're going to be okay, as in you're not going to die, or fine as in you're going to be on the sidelines coaching next week. That part we don't know. We don't know. So there might be some things ahead for the Kansas City Chiefs this week that we're going to have to actually pay attention to. The other thing was that the offense in general wasn't very sharp in this game. Chargers came out, they had a good defensive game plan. You have to give them credit. And this is the first game that I felt like the Chiefs offense wasn't sharp. Like again, against the Ravens, yes, they lost that game. They lost that game 35-36. The offense still played pretty well outside of Tyreek Hill. And again, this was another disappointing performance for Tyreek Hill. 5 catches, 56 yards on 7 targets. You still like the targets. There's better days ahead for Tyreek Hill. Somebody brought this up in this afternoon today that I was talking to, and they were saying, well, maybe Tyreek Hill will wind up becoming a buy low candidate. And I have a hard time imagining a guy like Tyreek Hill with, that name, the value that name alone has, and the offense that he's in is going to be a buy low candidate because he had 2 bad games after he had almost a 200-yard performance in week 1. If somebody is willing to sell you low on him, of course, always send out offers, check him out. But he's not going to be a buy low candidate of mine. He's not something I'm going to be aggressively going after because I can't see that actually being the case. Better days are ahead. Don't you worry. But I think what we saw today for the Chiefs offense is the result of what happens when a team is able to play solid defense and take away one of 2 of your go-to options. I think that's the one thing this offense is lacking. They don't have a go-to third option in this team. I think when they drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think they were hoping he would be that. But being that they don't have a Sammy Watkins anymore and being that Clyde Edwards-Helaire has not been that guy, they don't have a third option to really go to. Mahomes doesn't really have a third option to go to, not on a consistent basis anyway. You have this rotation going on between Mecole Hardman, DeMarcus Robinson, and Byron Pringle. And really, ultimately, those guys would all be wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5s on any other team in the NFL and be practically irrelevant, be practically relegated to special teams if they weren't playing on the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, who actually makes them semi-relevant. I don't think they would be relevant anywhere else. Mecole Hardman gets the touchdown today, but you don't care about anybody on fantasy, and that's with them being on the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. So I think what you saw today was a result of if you take Tyreek Hill away and they don't really have a third option to go to, Travis Kelce can go for 100 yards, which he did, 7 receptions, 104 yards, and 11 targets. And you can control the Chiefs. You can beat the Chiefs. You can make them mortal. We saw a little bit to some degree in the Ravens game. We saw it to more of a degree here in the Chargers game. So I think it's going to be something that's interesting to watch moving forward. Now, you're never going to always be able to take away Tyreek Hill. So I'm not worried about that. And Travis Kelce, no matter what seems to be going on with the Kansas City Chiefs, he'll find a way to get to 100 yards. It doesn't matter. Whether he scores or not might be the question, but he'll find a way to get to 100 yards. Has so far every single week this season. You're not going to worry about Mahomes, 263 touchdowns, had the 2 picks. He'll be fine. But here's where the conversation does start with the Kansas City Chiefs. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 17 carries, 100 yards.
By far his most efficient game of the year, 5.9 yards a carry. Still only saw 3 targets, 2 receptions for 11 yards. Or I'm sorry, 2 targets, 2 receptions, 9 yards. Gets the receiving touchdown, which really boosts his fantasy value on the day. But still not very involved in the pass game. In fact, Darrell Williams was just as involved and had the extra target. And had a red zone carry. He had 7 carries, 28 yards. When they got in close, he came in on the goal line again. He had the red zone carry. It wasn't Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So this is by far the most touches he's had so far this season, and by far the best efficiency he's had this season. Meaning to me, it's not necessarily sustainable because we haven't seen Clyde Edwards-Helaire touch the ball this much yet this year. We haven't seen him be this efficient yet this year. So basically, you're going to have two lines of thought. It's going to be, okay, this is Clyde Edwards-Helaire getting better moving forward, or this is going to be one of his better games of the year, and it's not sustainable. I subscribe to more, this is going to be one of being one of his better games of the year. Because he's just not consistently involved enough in the offense. He's not, and I don't think he's going to be. But this was what I wanted for Clyde Edwards-Helaire owners heading into this week. I said against the Chargers, it's a good matchup on paper. There's a decent chance they try to get him a little bit more involved. If he winds up having a good game, sell him immediately. You got the good game. You got the 100 yards on the ground. You got the receiving touchdown. Everyone's going to be looking at this a little bit differently. Like, oh, Edwards-Helaire on the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, yep, this is more what we expect for him to do. Maybe this is the start of him moving forward. Sell him, sell him, sell him. I just talked about how I would sell him straight up for Jonathan Taylor and how I think that deal can get done. Look for opportunities like that this week. It doesn't have to necessarily be a running back for a running back. If you need a receiver. But look, this is your opportunity to sell Clyde Edwards-Helaire high while you have the chance. Please, MD Nation, please take it. Because I don't think he has games that are much better. I'm not saying this is definitely his best game of the year, but I think there's a decent chance that it's close, if not the best game of the year. So take the opportunity while it's there. On the Charger side of the ball, Herbert performed more like the fantasy quarterback you wanted him to be. Still didn't get over 300 yards, but 281 yards, 4 touchdowns, looked good. Now, this is a good matchup. Again, the Kansas City Chiefs defense is much worse than it has been in years past. That's a big difference here. But he continues to utilize both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Williams getting 9 targets, Keenan Allen getting 12. They both got in the end zone. Mike Williams got in the end zone twice. They went over 122 yards, 7 receptions. Keenan Allen gets his 8 receptions, 50 yards. I will say this about Keenan Allen. He still I think he has a few more targets than Mike Williams through the first 3 weeks. But here's the thing. Because Mike Williams is now allowed to run a full route tree within this offense and get featured in a 1A, 1B situation, which I do think is what this is. I think this is a 1A, 1B situation. I don't think Allen or Mike Williams has more value than the other. I really don't. I think they're on the same level. The problem is now for Keenan Allen, I don't think he's that low-end wide receiver 1, especially in half-point, full-point PPR leagues that we're hoping you would get out of him when you drafted him because of the target volume. Now, you're 12 targets. He's still getting double-digit targets. He's still getting plenty of volume. But because Mike Williams is now operating all over the field as well, I think it might cap the amount of times Allen gets 100 yards or more this season. I think they might be a little bit fewer, a little bit farther in between. He was never a touchdown guy to begin with, so it's not something you're banking on for his value as well. I think ultimately you'll have a few more targets, you'll have a few more receptions than Mike Williams, but the yards might be close. Mike Williams has the bigger down the field threat. So while he's getting mixed in all over the field, he also gets down the field a little bit more. Had a nice 43-yarder in this one. I think the yards will be close, if not tilting towards Mike Williams. I definitely think he's going to have more touchdowns by the end of the year. There's a chance here Mike Williams is the more fantasy valuable asset, but I look at this as a 1A, 1B situation. I just think you have to look at them both as high-end wide receiver 2s who have very high floors because of the volumes that they're seeing, because it's so consolidated around those 2 receivers. But I think Keenan Allen's no longer that guy who could slip in and be that low-end wide receiver 1 by the end of the year. I don't know if he's necessarily had that because Mike Williams is kind of eating away at him a little bit, especially when it comes to the yards. Not worried about it, just kind of an observation I wanted to point out there. Austin Eckler doing Austin Eckler things. 6 receptions, 52 yards, a touchdown, 6 targets. 11 carries, 55 yards. The next closest running back, Larry Roundtree, with 4 carries and 3 yards on those 4 carries. There's nobody else involved. Austin Eckler, believe it or not, is a workhorse. And because they're a throw first team, not a run first team, he could be a workhorse while staying in that 16 to 20 touch area where he's not, necessarily getting overworked. I think it's going to continue. And he continues to get the red zone looks too, which is, I think, really a big key with Austin Eckler as well. Jared Cook, 2 receptions, 27 yards, 3 targets. He's back down to low-end tight end 2, Jared Cook. Stream and close your eyes if you feel like streaming him that day. I think he'll have some big games throughout the year, but you're never going to know when they're going to come. You're never going to know when they're going to come. Let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals and the Jacksonville Jaguars. This will be the last game we talk about for today. Jaguars got to figure something out. Did you see the crowd when Jamal Agnew brought back that 109 kickoff return or field goal return for a touchdown? First of all, yeah, that was great. That was awesome. Good for you. Big play. It'll be a highlight for, forever. But they looked at that like that was supposed to spark them. Everyone was expecting the fans, Urban Meyer, Jacksonville Jaguars themselves. Everyone was expecting that play to spark them. It did nothing. It did nothing. And the problem is the play calling. It's so incoherent. There's no rhyme or reason to it. When you call play, look at Kyle Shanahan. He's renowned as one of the best play callers in the league, or Sean McVay. Either one you want to look at. They do the same thing. They're calling a play to set up another play. They're not calling that play for that play in particular to, have to work exactly the way it's designed. That play is being called so they can take the information of what the defense shows on that play to set up another play down the road. So there's a sequence. There's coherency. Right now, the Jacksonville Jaguars look like they're out there calling plays and just throwing stuff to the wall and hoping something sticks. They're not setting anything up. Even in this game where they actually tried to get back to the running game to take a little pressure off of Trevor Lawrence, and they did to some success. I mean, James Robinson, 15 carries, 88 yards. He had a touchdown. Even Carlos Hyde was efficient. He had 8 carries for 44 yards in this game, both well over 5 yards a carry. You would think then, okay, the idea is that if you're going to get back to let's establish a running game and get play action off of that. They didn't do that. They had a handful of times. So what's the point? Set up Trevor Lawrence to be in a position to succeed. This is not a good Cardinal secondary here. And yet, you made them out to be world beaters. 22 of 34, 219 yards, a touchdown on 2 picks. That's what Trevor Lawrence had to look at. That's what he got. That's bad. I had Lawrence, somebody I thought could be a top 10 quarterback as a rookie because of the volume, number one, which the volume for the most part has been there, and the fact that he has weapons to be able to go to. And they would have some of these matchups because they were last place last year. They have some of these matchups where they should be able to put up points. It might not always look pretty, but from a fantasy perspective, all you're looking for is production. I can't trust that anymore. If you can't put up the numbers against the Cardinals, who am I going to trust to put up the numbers against? So far, the only team they've had decent numbers against was Houston. And again, they put up 21 points. This was bad. Now, Lawrence, he's not a streaming quarterback right now. The offensive line is too much in shambles. And until something changed with the play calling with Urban Meyer, until they get an identity, I don't know if you can trust Trevor Lawrence. Now, the wide receivers are something different. Marvin Jones continues to be the top targeted guy. He had 8 targets in this game, 6 receptions, 62 yards. Chark was the guy who came away with the touchdown, having 30 receptions, 49 yards on 6 targets. And Laviska Shenault continues to just be the check down guy. 4 receptions, 48 yards, 4 targets. Marvin Jones is the guy I want. I think Marvin Jones, he didn't score this week. He did score the last 2 weeks. But I think Marvin Jones is somebody who could be considered a higher end wide receiver 3, and in certain matchups be considered a low end wide receiver 2, potentially. I do think he's that guy because he's seeing a heck of a workload. This was actually the first game. Not only did he not score a touchdown, it was the first game he didn't see double-digit targets, and he still had 8, which is a lot. So that's the one guy I think on Jacksonville you can still trust on a week-to-week basis. James Robinson, maybe they're going to look to establish the run moving forward. I don't know. Maybe that's what the start of this was. I'll say this. I'd rather sell high on him too. Really nice game here. 6 receptions, 46 yards on 6 targets to go on top of the 88 yards and a touchdown he had on the ground. I just want to, until they figure something out, I just want to be out in the Jacksonville offense as much as humanly possible. Like I said, I like Marvin Jones. I think he's a nice plug and play player to have. I think he's a nice piece to have. I think DJ Chark's in the same mold too, because I think he still has more big play capability and touchdown. He'll be in the same kind of category, maybe a little bit lower than Marvin Jones, but the same category. So I like him there too. But you're not banking on those guys. And in James Robinson's case, I don't trust that come next week, they don't just decide we're going to forget about the running game again. I'd rather sell him a guy who has high volume, who has a nice performance here, kind of along the same lines of a Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He was drafted to be a solid RB2, and he put up decent production in this game. You can make the argument that they're looking to get back to getting Robinson involved to take some pressure off of Lawrence, who's been struggling early. You can make that argument to somebody. What are you going to get him for? I'm not entirely sure. I would maybe, like I said, Jonathan Taylor's a buy low candidate for me this week. Maybe I would package him with something to try to get a deal done, potentially. But I'm looking to sell James Robinson if you can, because I can't trust this team at all. On the Cardinals side, better days are ahead. They have this tendency to play down their opponents. It's annoying, but Kyler Murray didn't have the big blow-up game you were hoping for. Did go over 300 yards passing. Didn't have any passing touchdowns. Had the one interception. He still gets you the rushing touchdown, though. So this is Kyler Murray. He's always going to be a top 10 quarterback. Always. Even in games where he doesn't really do as much as you would hope he would, like in this game. My real disappointment was DeAndre Hopkins, and you knew you were running a risk. Now, if you have Hopkins and he's healthy and he's playing, or I should say if he's playing, you play Hopkins. Yes, he walked away for 3 catches and 21 yards and 6 targets in this game. Yes, he was clearly out there to be more of a decoy than an actual involved player, although he still had a red zone target in this game. If he's out there, you play him. There's no way around that. This is one of those things you chalk up. He wasn't healthy, but you had no other choice. You don't beat yourself up for a decision like this. But here's how bad the Jaguars defense is. They literally brought a man back from the dead. That's how bad they are. AJ Green, who's been washed up for over a year, goes over 100 yards in this game. 5 receptions, 6 targets, 112 yards. By far his best game of the year. No, he's not a pickup. No, he's not going to be on my waiver wire report. No, I don't expect this to continue. But this is just how bad the Jaguars defense is. That AJ Green, at this point in his career, with what he has shown, can be a guy who puts up over 100 yards. That's what's that bad. It's that bad. It's that bad. Like I said, it's not going to continue. Christian Kirk, 7 receptions. He goes over 100 yards as well. I do think he has some games like this. I don't think this is the best game of Christian Kirk. I don't think this is something that's going to be a fluke for Christian Kirk. He had 8 at some point this season. Kirk and Rondale Moore will overtake AJ Green on the roster, and AJ Green will be the 4th receiver. But Kirk's, whether he's the 3rd guy or the 2nd guy, he's always going to be out in the field enough where he can have these kind of games in these kind of matchups and be that wide receiver 4 guy you can kind of plug and play in there and hope for a big game out of. I think this is kind of typical. I think he's a guy you need to hold, you need on your team, just have, the right adjusted expectations for him. I know Rondale Moore was, I said DeAndre Hopkins was the biggest disappointment. I was wrong. It was Rondale Moore was the biggest disappointment. 2 targets, 2 receptions, a yard, 1 carry for 3 yards. After the first 2 weeks, even though he was a guy who wasn't playing a ton, was always getting utilized when he's on the field. And you have this game, you're going into it, you're thinking like, well, Hopkins is going to be banged up, even if he's going to be limited. The way Moore has played and going up against Jacksonville, a lot of people felt, including me, I had Rondale Moore as a high-end wide receiver 4, borderline low-end wide receiver 3 heading into this matchup because of how much he had been utilized when he was on the field, how great, how explosive he looks, and you go up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. There's some people who took shots on Rondale Moore in their 10 or 12-man leagues, and it backfired. That happens. You're still holding Rondale Moore. You don't take anything out of this game. At least I hope you wouldn't. He's still very much an upside play as the season goes on. But, I can understand it. This was the first you could play him, and it backfired on you. Backfired this badly. You feel a little burnt by it right now. I get that. Moments will come for Rondale Moore. Don't move off of him, please. As far as the running backs go, Connor winds up with 2 touchdowns this week. Still inefficient, 3.9 yards a carry. Still did have 1 touchdown vultured by Kyler Murray in this game. But the same thing has played out the last 3 weeks now with this backfield. If they get in the red zone, if they get within a 10, James Conner's coming in the game. So even whether it goes to Kyler Murray or James Conner for the touchdowns, it's relevant for Chase Edmonds. He just gets capped because he's just not going to get those red zone looks. He had as many carries as Conner in this game. This is the first game he was less efficient than Conner was. He had 11 carries for 26 yards, only 2.4 yards a carry. But he does what he does best. 7 receptions, 49 yards, 8 targets. Half point, full point PPR leagues, Chase Edmonds continues to be an RB3. And he's still an RB3 with upside. We know this is a guy who can break a big play and will eventually. When it's going to come, who knows? But you're playing him more as a solid floor RB3 because of his involvement in the passing game, and he's a more efficient runner than Conner more times than not. But I don't know if he's ever consistently going to be an RB2 unless Conner were to get injured. Because it doesn't look like they're going to give him the opportunity to actually run away with the job. It doesn't look like it's going to, at least not yet anyway. So until further notice, you can't consider him to be a guy who could be an RB2 for you, but a high floor RB3 who does have big play potential is what you can look at him to be. So a very solid flex play, and continues to show that through the first 3 weeks. That's going to do it for the show, guys. We're actually going to wrap this up a few minutes early. I hope you all enjoyed it. We recapped everything. We'll keep you up to date on all the injury news throughout the week. If you follow us on social media at Belly Up MDFF Show, subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content that we have coming out throughout the week. Remember, we'll be back at 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning with the Sunday night, Monday night recaps and the waiver wire report. Along with that special time on Thursday morning from 9 to 11 a.m., we're going to preview the entire week 4, so make sure you don't miss that. We won't be back on Friday like we normally are. The show will be back on Saturday with the MD's DFS contest, but it's just going to be Chris and Chaz for that one. But make sure we get you off to the weekend right, get you off winning some money, like we always try to do. Subscribe to any one of your favorite pod streaming apps for the show, iHeart, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, Spreaker. And then check us out from 6 to 7:30 Monday on the Unhinged Radio Network, unhingedsn.airtime.pro. We'll have more content coming for you there. Guys, good luck for Sunday night. Good luck for Monday night. I hope you guys get your miracles if you're looking for one, or hold on to your leads if you're in the lead. MD Nation, take care. We're going to talk to you guys real soon.